Hey, good morning, guys. Barry Scarborough here, watching on the wall for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Ezekiel 33, verse 6 and 7 is the theme of the ministry. We watch and we look for the soon rapture of the church. Man, how do we know that it's soon? I mean, the historic events of this week, if this doesn't have you looking, I'm not sure what will. Amazing as to what's going on. And the goal of this ministry is to get as many people to Jesus Christ as we possibly can in these end times. A couple of things that I wanted to speak to this morning. I mean, the first is the amazing news of this week. And you guys coach me up on which day. I think it was it Monday or was it Tuesday that Trump signed the Gaza peace deal. So I think that, let's see, Trump declares end of Israel-Hamas war, signs the peace deal, and this is the first step, is what they say, of a three-step plan to help with peace in Gaza. And this is a quote from Trump: "The skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still." Again, making his case for the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, it's unbelievable. So 1,900 Palestinians were swapped for 20 Israeli prisoners, as part of the first step of Trump's 20-point plan. So one point it was 21, now it's 20-point plan. Kind of interesting to figure out which one that one is. Donald Trump claimed at the peace summit in Egypt that the, quote, war in Gaza is over, end quote, though only the first phase of an agreement has been reached. Couple of things. Now, many nations, essentially covenant with many nations signed this, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East nations, Israel, U.S., the list kind of goes on and on. And it was signed at a town by the name of Sharm el-Sheikh. And that is also known as the City of Peace. And this, of course, reminds us of 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 3, when they say peace and security, sudden destruction will come. The question that a lot of believers have right now, and I don't think we need to get freaked out about this, is this the covenant with many? Here's what I would say. There's a couple of things. First and foremost, let's go to Scripture, Daniel chapter 9. If this isn't the covenant with many, I struggle to understand what it would be, okay? So if getting all the Middle Eastern nations and developed countries to sign on the dotted line for peace is not the foundational covenant that is eventually discussed in Daniel 9, I don't know what would be. I don't know what else it could be. Does that make sense? Now, I know that'll probably trigger a firestorm of those that disagree that this is the covenant. And people will say, well, he didn't confirm it. No, he didn't. And this is not the actions of the Antichrist. We know this distinctly from Daniel 9. This doesn't mean that we don't know that Trump is not. I don't believe that he is. But this doesn't mean that we know for certain that that's not the case. There's many reasons I don't think Trump's the Antichrist. The major reason is that billions of people hate him, and the Antichrist is universally loved and absolutely adored. So I think that's a complete knockout right there. The Antichrist is admired, adored, and you're like, well, Trump is adored. Yeah, by some people, but there's hundreds of millions, if not more, that absolutely hate him. Okay, so I think that's your Antichrist knockout. But we're not here to talk about who the Antichrist is, because we will be raptured prior to the Antichrist, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Okay, so let's look real quick. Let's go to Daniel 9:25. So you are to know and understand that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with streets and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. Of course, speaking forward to the tribulation times, okay? And then you can do, I'm not here to do that, but you can do the calculation from, let's see, I believe it's Artaxerxes, all the way up to the very day, some people would say it's April 6th, some people would say it's April 14th of 32 AD, up to the very day that Christ is crucified. But you could also look at the very calculations. Matter of fact, the Old Testament scholars could definitely have seen this, and they could have calculated the very day that Christ entered through the east gate into Jerusalem on a donkey. Now, that was prophesied distinctly here in Daniel 9:25. I'll get into another prophecy here in a minute, but then let's look at Daniel 9:27. And he will confirm, small h he, this would be the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week, for 7 years. And people are like, well, this isn't for 7 years, so this can't be the covenant. Absolutely can be the covenant. Let's read this again, because what does the Antichrist come in and do? The Antichrist comes in and says, things have broken down. Things are not good. There's war, there's desolations, there's difficulty. Remember, the Antichrist rises out of the ashes of war, of problems, of difficulty. So understand what we're probably talking about. We don't know this completely. You can't know any of this stuff prophetically completely, but what you would imagine, she would have the rapture. That would trigger a lot of problems, okay? 500 million, 1 billion people go missing. That's going to create a lot of problems. Going to create a lot of infrastructure problems, economic problems, collapse issues, etc. That in turn can start many of the horses riding. The black horse, which is economy, the red horse, which is war, etc., etc. Now, Daniel 9:27, and he will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offerings. So the thought is that in the early part of the tribulation, some would say it has to be right at the front. Again, these are things that I'm cautious with just exactness because we don't know all these things completely. So I got a mosquito in here. But the covenant, you have to have a covenant in place so that it can be confirmed. Could this be that covenant? Could this be that peace deal that is eventually confirmed after Antichrist? If I had a whiteboard, what I would put up there is, sometimes I kind of wish I did, like a flip chart or what. Maybe I should get a flip chart for you guys. But what we're talking about is rapture, difficulty, problems, societal collapse, potential wars and battles, etc., and the Antichrist rises up. Do we know the time frame of all that? Not necessarily. We don't know the time frame of all that. Some would say it's rapture and then it's immediate tribulation because of what the problems the rapture creates. There can be a gap between the rapture and the start of the tribulation. Some would then say, well, the start of the tribulation is confirmed by this very signing. Okay, there's a case to be made for a lot of that, but there's a case to be made against a lot of that. So let's not get overly dogmatic about these things. What we do know biblically is we will rapture before the wrath. Revelation 3:10, 1 Thessalonians, 1 Corinthians. God is not going to beat the heck out of his bride before he takes his bride. That's just not, it's not in God's character. Doesn't fit the typology of Enoch, doesn't fit the typology of Noah, doesn't fit the typology of Lot. I could go on and on. But the answer I have for you guys is yes. I believe that this is the foundational covenant that will eventually be confirmed in some way. Because as I said earlier in the video, if you can find a stronger covenant with many, if we feel like there's a covenant with many that's coming in future that's a bigger deal than this one, you could color me shocked. So my perspective is that this is likely the covenant, but remember, the covenant then gets broken down, it's shattered. We know biblically, according to this perspective that we're sharing, if we believe this, that this is the covenant, that the ceasefire will break, that eventually there's the rapture, that eventually that war will come out again, we'll have serious wars and battles going on, and then the Antichrist rises. So I want you thinking about this. Rapture, war, difficulty, economic collapse, etc. That is the start of the tribulation, but that's how the Antichrist rises up. You say, well, we need peace right now. Look at all the war going on right now. Exactly. But we know biblically that eventually a covenant has to be put in place, which I believe this is the one. And then it has to be confirmed by the Antichrist after the rapture of the church. If you want to, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 explains why we will not be here to see the rise of Antichrist. We won't be here to see it. We can see the foreshadow. And look, there's a lot of people that, Obama, Trump, Macron, Pope, ones that haven't even risen up yet, we don't know. But yes, I think this was one of the more historic weeks in all of prophetic history, because I believe that this is the foundational covenant with many. A ton of nations signed this. Heavy pressure was put on even Hamas to sign it. You get Hamas to sign something, you've done something, folks. And then they've agreed to a 3-phased plan. I think 6 weeks a crack. Isn't that interesting? 6, 6, 6. And I'll have to reread that again. You guys confirm that for me. But I believe there are 3 phases, each consisting of 6 weeks. If that doesn't give you chills. 3 phases of 6 weeks each. Boom, boom, boom. To start this peace process. Well, if we believe that this is the foundational covenant, we also know then prophetically, if we're correct, which again, we could be incorrect, and let's not just go crazy on each other if we're not. We see through a mirror dimly. But if we're correct, this will not hold. This won't hold at all. This won't hold. This may not even make it to phase 2, may not even make it 2 or 3 weeks before the bombing starts and the fighting starts again, and it's a total disaster. We know this. Why? Because Daniel 9:27 says, and he will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle, so 7 years, but in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. So what is likely to happen, rapture, difficulty, war, challenges, problems, economic collapse, okay, especially if you're a pre-trib rapture believer, and then Antichrist rises up. So let's throw this out there. Let's say we rapture this month. Let's say we rapture in December. Let's say we rapture in March. I don't know. You guys pick a time frame. After that, the world is going to fall to its knees because it's going to be like, wait a minute. 500 million, a billion people done gone. They vanished into thin air, and babies have disappeared from mothers' wombs, and all the kids are out of here. Everyone under the age of accountability is swooped up by the Lord Jesus. 1 Thessalonians, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 can give you more details on the rapture of the church. Okay, this will create so much chaos that you will have economic collapse. You will have additional wars. We've got 57 countries in an active war right now, most since right after World War II. You would have collapse of societal structures and governments and monetary systems, etc., etc., etc. So this would require somebody to step up. Then the Antichrist rises. So how long that takes, I don't know. Is that 6 months, a year? I don't know. Then the Antichrist goes, no, I got this. But what we need to do is we need to confirm this Gaza peace deal for at least 7 years. We need to confirm it globally for at least 7 years. But it takes someone of the Antichrist's spiritual demonic persuasion and stature to get this thing signed. And I believe he will refer back to this deal. He'll say, we need to sign that deal. That's the deal we need to sign, but we need to sign it for 7 years, folks. This 3 phases at 6 weeks a crack is not doing it. And people were not listening to global leaders, or they didn't listen to Trump, or they didn't listen, right? They'll listen to me. That's what the Antichrist will say. They will listen to me. And he will be so persuasive, so loved, so adored worldwide that people will go, oh, he's finally the one that would do it. So if we're correct, this will fail. And it should fail. I don't want it to fail, but biblically, it would fail. Biblically, it fails if we're correct about this being the covenant, because the Antichrist confirms it. The reason you don't need to worry about that, Christian, is you're going to be raptured before that. So you got to back that up. You got the Antichrist rising, you got the war and the difficulty and the famine and the economic collapse, etc. And then you got the rapture before that, and we're sitting before that at the covenant, the first foundational covenant. So there you go. Not to mention, which I have always found quite interesting, and I've done a lot of videos on this one. Daniel 9:25 prophesies as follows. So you are to know and understand that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So 483 years. I've done a ton of videos on this. Well, in 1541, Suleiman the Magnificent, commissioned the walls. From 1535 to 1541, Suleiman the Magnificent commissioned what we now know as the Western Wall and the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, you say, well, why do I care? I'll tell you why you might care. The former Sultan of the Ottoman Empire commissioned the building, Suleiman the Magnificent. Okay, he died September 7th, 1566, born November 6th, 1494. But the walls, it's believed that the walls of Jerusalem were completed between 1535 and 1541. Okay, so we take Daniel 9:25 and we say, now this is a dual fulfillment prophecy, but we look at Daniel 9:25 and we say, so you are to know and understand that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with streets and moat, even in times of distress. This is going to be a dual fulfillment. Okay? So if you take, I'm getting my calculator out again. 69 weeks times 7, so it's weeks of years, you get 483 years. We've talked about this many, many times. If I take 483 years and add it to 1541, I get 2024. You're like, but wait a minute, brother. What do you mean 2024? Well, hold with me. Hang with me. Those are the times that we believe that the wall was completed. We believe the wall was completed. Could it have been completed in 1542? For all we know, it could have been 1542. Okay, 1542 plus 483 gets you to 2025. This would be the time frame then of the rebuild of the temple. Okay, it'll be built again with streets and moat even in times of distress. Now, some people would counter my claim and say, well, brother, the prophecy's already spot on, because the rebuild of the temple actually started in 2024 when a group of rabbis began the process of laying the cornerstones and the foundational stones underneath what will soon be the temple foundation. So people have said that rabbis are already, and various priests are already laying stones and cornerstones underneath what soon will be the third temple. Well, if that happened in 2024, then this prophecy is spot on from 1541 to 2024, and the temple work already began last year. It began last year. But you don't need to worry about whether or not the temple will be complete. But what does that tell you? That tells you we're right in the time. We're right in the time. Then after that, okay, so you're to understand that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with streets and moat even in times of distress. That would be 483 years plus 1541 gets us to 2024, which would be the first year that actual construction of the temple started. Look up the articles. There's many articles of Levite priests and various rabbis beginning the early construction of the foundation of the temple last year. Not to mention the red heifer ashes, on and on. They're ready to go. They're sitting on G, waiting on O. That means we are right in the time of the rebuild of the third temple, but most importantly, until Messiah the Prince, that we're looking at the return of Messiah the Prince. 483 years from Suleiman the Magnificent building out. And when you see people wailing and praying at the Western Wall, those walls were built by Suleiman the Magnificent and completed in 1541. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Okay, that Messiah being cut off was talked about the first advent of Messiah. This, we're talking about the second advent of Messiah. There are two calculations. The first calculation has been done almost down to the day, folks, of the time, and I think it's from the walls of, I think it's Artaxerxes, right? So it's Artaxerxes. Yeah, is that right? Yeah. So I think Artaxerxes, is that right? And he completed the walls in, when did he complete the walls? 448 BC minus 483 gets you to 35 or 34 AD. Point is, it gets you right. I'm not doing the calculations right. I'm messing up the calculation with my calculator. Point is, people have calculated this down to the very day that Christ came into Jerusalem. If we perhaps knew the exact time frame that Suleiman walls were completed, then you might be able to add 483 years exactly to that and get the exact time in, 2024 that priests and rabbis, etc., started the temple. Okay? But our key here is to look at until Messiah the Prince. So you're to know and understand that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 483 years. So I believe that gives us added perspective on last year and this year being the build out of the temple, and this year being an incredibly high watch time for us to consider. Yeah, I think this is the covenant. I really do. So, look, it doesn't change things other than this could be one of the more historic weeks in all prophetic time. They're calling Trump Cyrus Reborn. They're calling him the Prince of Peace, which is Jesus is the only Prince of Peace. They're giving him Messiah-like titles. This is unbelievable, what people are doing with Trump. It's just kind of stunning. You remember he's had a golden statue made of himself, not made of himself, but a likeness, and he allowed the picture to be posted about him in Gaza. He signs things, finishing it with "I am." I mean, there's definitely spiritual nuances here that are absolutely unbelievable and just jumping off the biblical pages here if you see them and you watch them. So we watch and we look. We're still what, in tabernacles, still in this time frame. This is a very, very high watch time for the rapture of the church. Don't shrink back. Don't get overly caught up in, well, it has to be this hour or this time frame. This is very, very high watch through all of this fall into, I would say, into Hanukkah from my perspective. I mean, this is now, Dr. Tom Horn would say it's high watch up through October 31st in particular, because of Apophis and his visions there. I believe there's a lot of things that are pointing us to the soon and coming rapture. So be encouraged, brothers and sisters. There's links in the description box if you want to partner with me. It's an honor to run the race with you guys. Let's get as many people to Jesus Christ as we possibly can. Share John 3:16. Share 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. And gosh, Jesus is coming soon, guys. Be encouraged. Love you guys.